Thank you very much, Mr. President Tshisekedi, for granting me the opportunity for this interview. It's a pleasure for me to be sitting with you here in Kinshasa. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam. We are also proud of you, and we are honored to be interviewed by the only African journalist in the White House. You're welcome to Kinshasa, you along with your delegation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So to begin, I would like to hear from you. How would you describe the current situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mr. President?
Yeah, this is an unjust situation as it's imposed to us. We are victims. We have started so many sites in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The first one was the one which was consist of building peace. I visited all the 9 neighboring countries to the DRC. I met my counterparts to talk about the necessity of developing common development program for the benefit of our populations. The other project was the one consist of rebuilding our country with infrastructures, and the other one was speaking to the social aspects. We launched free education program, and we are working on the universal health coverage so that we can improve access to health care for all Congolese citizens. And while we were working on all that, we were victim of the unjust war that's hiding looting intentions, the intentions to loot our mineral and agricultural resources. This is unfortunately the unjust situation that we are experiencing.
You mentioned a few times injustice and victim. What would you like the international community to better understand about this conflict? Something that maybe it's often overlooked or misunderstood.
Well, the international community should understand that this started from the genocide from Rwanda in 1994. Back then, the DRC was called Zaire, and the Zaire president, late Mobutu, was invited to open the borders to receive the Rwandan refugees that were running away from genocide. But unfortunately, among those victims, there was among them genocide causes, doers, and we would have done it otherwise in order to control those genocide doers. But we gave to Rwandan army the authority to enter the Congolese territory and to sort that issue. And from that time on, the crisis started in the DRC, and the international community have forsaken us. And we are victims, and we have millions of victims recorded since then. Now, we believe that the international community ought to take side with us and help us sort this situation. That's why I would like to hereby thank the Trump administration for the efforts they are doing, and I'm even convinced that this will be successful. And I really want to say that finally the international community, through the United States taking the lead, have understood that they needed to help the DRC people.
Let's then talk about this upcoming peace deal signing ceremony. What is this peace deal about? Can you explain?
Well, there is nothing magic in this agreement. As I just said, it's all about the awareness within the U.S. administration, the awareness on the conflicts that exist for about 30 years and which has caused millions of victims. So, just like any other initiative, it consists of ending the war and achieving the unconditional withdrawal of all the armed groups and all. In addition to that, we also have to come to a solution to this war, which is basically an economic war. And just to give you background, I just said it. This is something I've tried to do when I took office in 2019. I went and paid visit to neighboring countries. Back then, there was Rwanda and Uganda and Burundi that were the most concerned, because back then Burundi also joined Uganda and Rwanda against the DRC in order to suggest this deal between us and see how we could be able to move towards a cooperation based upon economic exchanges instead of fighting, having these tensions, useless tensions that would have consequences on the stability of the region. Unfortunately, in 2022, Rwanda went on war against us, and Uganda understood that we are now building good relationship with President Museveni, and Burundi, thanks to President Ndayishimiye, they have also considerably improved their relation with the DRC. They are now a sister country. Now we hope that with the mediation of the U.S. administration, this peace will come true.
Why do you think President Trump is so interesting to bring peace to DRC? Why he's working so hard to bring peace to DRC, in your point of view?
D'abord parce qu'il l'a annoncé.
First and foremost, because he announced it.
Ensuite, parce que
and then
President Trump
represents the first world power. The U.S. are actually the leaders, and everybody knows the influence of the U.S. I was talking about the international community, and I believe that the United States has some responsibility in what's happened in the region. This might not be to mean that they are guilty, but they have the responsibility, which is that they trusted a regime, Rwandan regime, that was involved in the genocide, and as they were trying to correct the mistakes they made, they even caused other mistakes and other crises in the DRC. And I think this awareness from the U.S. administration will change the tide.
As you know, Mr. President Trump eagerly desired to bring peace to DRC, as he personally told me many times. And he put together this specific team that has been working really hard to push this deal to really happen. And he not only wants to bring peace to DRC, he also wants to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. He's looking the situation in the Middle East. And my question for you, Mr. President, when we see peace finally reach DRC, are you considering to be the first African president to nominate President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize? Pakistan just did it, by the way.
Quand est-ce qu'elle interviendra, ça c'est Dieu seul qui sait.
When will we achieve peace? God alone knows.
Un mérite ici que je reconnais au président.
I owe something to President Trump. I acknowledge that he really considered this issue personally, and we really owe acknowledgement for this. He appointed a very ineffective team led by Dr. Massad Boulos. They are working with, in collaboration with our friends from Qatari, and also with the presence of the African Union, led by President Faure Gnassingbé. Well, this is something that's progressing very well, and now we are at the point of the principal agreement. A set of principles have been selected for the agreement, and if everything goes well, by the end of next week, both of our foreign ministers from Congo and Rwanda would meet in the United States to sign more than a principal agreement, and then we will come to endorse around President Trump in the United States. But I don't know when that would take place. It will depend upon both the progress of the events on the ground, but also it will depend on the U.S. agenda. As we know that the U.S. are involved in so many issues. You talked about the Middle East, and you talked about the war between Russia and Ukraine, and we also have the conflict between Iran and the DRC. So it will depend on those, but I think this might take place around mid-July. But then after that, I believe if they manage to achieve this, to end an unjust conflict that has caused thousands and hundreds of thousands of were dead. And some people would say that this war has caused more dead than the Second World War. And I think if President Trump, thanks to mediation, managed to definitely end this war, he would really deserve this Nobel Prize. I would go the first to vote for him.
And Mr. President, as we know, the narrative about the Democratic Republic of the Congo around the world is not good. Many people see this country as a very corrupted country and with problems with bad governance. When this peace deal is finally reached, are you planning to lead a very deep work combating corruption in this country?
No, not at all. Let's talk about this issue on corruption. Generally, the DRC is stigmatized. Of course, corruption exists everywhere in the world. Even in democratic countries everywhere here, you would hear about corruption cases. So this is not something that is very specific to the DRC alone. And then you have to know that there are multiple items that are to be considered in our country when you talk about this corruption. The first thing is behavior. During all these recent years, we have considered issues with behaviors. Consequently, corruption is very key and very obvious in African Congolese people. And then we also have this legal system of the country, which should see to sorting this issue. And we also have the social conditions, meaning the salaries that are making it difficult for other people to eat ends to mouth. And this is something that we have started working on since I took office in 2019. We started fighting against that. I have established multiple mindset change mechanisms, and there is a unit that's focused on that, and there is another one that's fighting against corruption via sensitization and denunciation. I started reforms, and today I think it's not perfect yet, but still we are working on it.
Have you seen progress?
Yes, of course, if recorded progress. I will mention that the third element is the revenues. When I came to power, the budget of the DRC was around $1,000 billion, and today we have tripled this amount, and today we are able to collect that thanks to the mechanisms that we have established. We have collected more revenues, and we are also going to mobilize our efforts as we have to diversify our economy. We are going definitely to enlarge our we're going to have the possibility to improve the effectiveness of the justice and the legal system, and this would enable us to reduce the impact of corruption on the economy. So we just need some time, and we also need peace and stability. This will allow for us to achieve all this. That's why the deal, as we were talking about that, the economic deal with the United States is well perceived here, as this will allow for us to not only extract our minerals and to also assign responsibles for those, but also to process them and transform them locally by improving our energy capacity of transforming, providing value addition, creating job and wealth, and this will allow for an economic development, and this will have impact on the mindset of the Congolese people, as I just said, and this will allow for them to work for the development of their country instead of corrupting the economic system. So that's it. We just need some more time. We need concentration. We need peace and stability.
President, the peace agreement, the peace that will come to DRC will bring a lot of opportunities for investment. Are you considering to boost this fight against corruption? Because there is many investors that will be looking to come to DRC. But the current situation is not the best. Still, corruption is there, even though President mentioned there is a lot of effort being done to fight corruption. But are you planning to boost this fight against corruption?
Of course. But we did not wait for this economic deal to launch these initiatives. I'm already talking about what we've done with our Chinese friends. When I came to power, I saw injustice in the partnership that China signed with the government, and I sorted that injustice. I traveled to China and I spoke with the leadership, and I told them that I was expecting a win-win partnership, but unfortunately I noticed that here China was taking most parts of the benefits than the Congo, and our Chinese friends accepted to review that, and now we are trying to rebalance things regarding that. Now, of course, this deal will have impact on not only the life standard, the living standards of the Congolese citizens, but also regarding the behavior, the mindsets, which is very vulnerable to corruption. When you have financial capacity, you are less vulnerable to corruption. So that's it.
And how do you plan to ensure security for foreign investors in the areas that were in conflict?
Yeah, for those areas, today we are fighting against this conflict. We are trying to eradicate thanks to this mediation by the US, which I commend, but also through capacity building of our defense forces and security forces. And regarding that, I believe we were very unsuccessful, and even the last aggression by Rwanda in the city of Goma and Bukavu demonstrates that we have been very unsuccessful in our defense system. But of course, it's thanks to reforms, partnerships, and also investment into that institutions, namely intelligence service and the army. This will allow for us to improve this protection system for the citizens and for our borders. So that's what we are preparing. And I believe this investment will be welcome, since they will allow for the DRC as well as for the US to build more tie, and consequently we will have more common interest to preserve, and the US experience will also be very beneficial for us in that time.
And do you have policies to engage the Congolese diaspora? in national development. There is a lot of Congolese very talented and with skills that can also bring their knowledge to develop the country. Are you planning to have any policy to engage those Congolese people in the diaspora?
Well, the first policy, as far as I'm concerned, is the law on nationality. As you know, today, Congolese nationality is exclusive. This means when you have Congolese nationality, you have no right to have another nationality. While we have lots of citizens from the Congo and who have gotten additional nationalities. So we have to really fight for this principle. But in the Congo, it's very sensitive since we have borderline conflicts, namely the conflict with Rwanda, where we saw that we were victim of infiltration. Rwandan citizens came and introduced themselves as being Congolese, so this is a very sensitive topic. And the second thing that we have already started doing, which is cancelling visas for citizens with Congolese origin. Even though they have another additional nationality, they have the right to come back to the Congo without any visa requirements. So this is something effective since I took office. Now we're also working and trying to come up with taxation incentives for those Congolese people that would come back to the Congo with the purpose of investing. But of course, you talked about those who have knowledge and skills, maybe professors or doctors. We're also trying to improve conditions thanks to the development program of 145 territory development that I have established with the purpose of improving the living condition in those territories that are living in unsecure conditions. We are building agricultural feeder roads, schools, health facilities, administration offices, in order to make life more comfortable and fight against rural exodus. And I believe all of this will have impact on the decisions of our fellow countrymen that are living abroad that will decide to leave the United States and come to the countryside, somewhere in a remote area in the Congo, maybe in Ituri, Chopo, Kasai, and you name it, to go and contribute to development. So these will be the main major pillars that we are developing. As I just said, it takes peace and stability because it's impossible to achieve such without peace and stability.
Mr. President, I have one more question that probably many Africans are trying to listen from you. In your point of view, what is so difficult for Africans to find solution for their own problems? For example, what went wrong with Luanda process, Nairobi process, African Union, SADC, all those Africans trying to bring solution for this conflict between DRC and Rwanda, that at the end of the day, DRC ended up looking for solution in Doha, and now is the United States leading this peace process?
Madame, vous avez posé une question vraiment,
well, you've asked a very key question, which speaks to the very necessity of the existence of Africa. And I'm very against this sort of hypocrisy that we have between Africans. We easily talk about African solutions to African problems, but to some point, thanks to this trial, this unjust crisis that we've been experiencing caused by Rwanda, it's helped me have a clear view of this slogan, which is void. And we had proof and evidence. We were subject to Rwandan aggression, but I did not see African countries, at least not many African countries, that would stand and claim against us. Some counterparts would approach me and tell me during some forums and African forums, they would tell me something in private, but they would not be able to say it openly. And I have to really commend President Lourenço, who is an excellent mediator, who really tried his level best to achieve this peace. And if there was if we managed to meet in December 15 in Luanda, we would be able to sort this issue with the crisis. I also commend some SADC countries that have supported us. I would mention South Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi. These are countries that have really considered this seriously in order to make progress. And also have to say thank you to Uganda, Kenya, and Burundi, basically Burundi. They have they really stood with us and took side with us. I really have to mention this country because many others did not take the courage to be involved as these countries have done. And this is the issue that we have in Africa. Obviously, we also have some influence from outside the continent, I think. But I believe the true independence is to be able to say that we have principles that we agreed upon. And among these principles that we agreed upon, we have the one that speaks to the non-aggression of an African state on another African state. So once this is successful and achieved, this is a principle that we all agreed upon. We should be courageous enough to say this cannot take place, but we're not doing it. The issue with the Africans is that we are ourselves the very problem. We are accepting and agreeing upon principles that we do not abide by. When I took office in 2019, there was a resolution that read, in 2020, the objective would be to silence the arms and weapons in Africa. Was it achieved? No. Today, it's very unsuccessful, meaning we are voting principles that we do not even abide by. As long as we behave this way, other continents would never respect us, would be crying here and there saying that African people are not respected. This is what we have to start doing. We can only be respected by others as long as we are able to respect the commitment we made.
President, that we as an Africans, we are not united. We don't have the same view in some matters. That's why we continue to have those problems.
Well, our union is only, it's not real. How can you ever talk about unity when a nation can go cause millions of deaths in a neighboring territory? And this is seen by everyone with the purpose of looting of minerals. What kind of unity would you talk about? I want you to really delve deeper into this word. I cannot define unity with this behavior. So it's only, it's not real, that unity. We just talk about it, but it's not real. Maybe I was naive as I believed in this African unity, but I think it's, I think this is the lesson that I learned from this crisis, and it's really therefore important to go everywhere across Africa and say that the African unity that we all talk about is not real. The African unity would really start with respecting the principles that we have selected and voted for, and the one that...
Last question, Mr. President. What message would you like to send to President Trump, saying that finally those years of war that Congolese people have been suffering is about to end?
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you for his interest, as during the first term of President Trump, he completely overlooked Africa. But now he has demonstrated interest for Africa, and we thank him for that. And I also want to encourage him to pursue and advance. For Africa, I am convinced, and I believe I'm not the only one believing this, Africa is the future of the world. Now is high time to prepare for this future, taking side with Africa and supporting us in our efforts aiming at developing our continent. And I'm convinced that if President Trump keeps on doing that, he will remain the president, if not the greatest, at least one of the greatest that the United States has ever had. And I believe he will receive this Nobel Prize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madame.
Thank you, Madam. I'm honored.